Welcome. Welcome, everybody. How are you doing today? It's so very nice to have you here. And today I wanted to speak a little bit about our upcoming 5-week program for returning students. I have been sitting with this focus for our program. And I have been realizing over and over and over again both the importance of our practice, which really is the translation, practical application, practical translation of our desire for truth, and the importance of the nervous system. So key, so crucial, because the nervous system means capacity to be here when the past arises, right? We can either engage, reenact, we can try to suppress, or we can just learn to be here. There's also the importance of discrimination, right? Which is what we are learning more and more as we are sitting together, to really recognize the difference between past and present. And you know how that is, how often the patterns of the past are so familiar that it's still really difficult for us to recognize, this is the past, right? There is, of course, this, very important element, which is what I call trust. One of the reasons why we are together is because we don't fully trust yet. You don't fully trust yet your true nature. And that's why you need this presence manifesting on the outside, that it can tell you, here, go this way. This is where it's at. This is where you go, right? But also going back to the nervous system, the importance, I have been realizing again, the importance of resilience. Resilience in the face of the arising past. And also resilience as our capacity to be here, and also capacity to function in a world. Because you see, in a moment when the past arises and the nervous system is impaired in some way, or we don't have enough discrimination, right? We don't recognize it as a past, or there's not enough capacity, right? Then not only that we can't be here, we can't be present with what is, but we also can't function in a way that is reflective of our true nature, that is reflective of our realization or recognition of presence. So there are very interesting topics this summer. It's a short program, it's 5 weeks. And I always try to put as many things as possible for us to touch upon when we have this time together. But we are not only going to speak about it, we are also going to really practice and really have time for questions and for inquiry. But so they are very interesting topics, because there's the topic of our practice. And what is practice is really a practical application of our desire for truth. But what are the obstacles to practice? How come it's difficult to it sounds so simple, let's just be here, right? How come it's so difficult to come and be here, practice? What are the obstacles? And that's, I call that karma, right? We need to understand the right understanding of karma, the obstacles to practice. And also we want to deepen and nurture our practice and really deepen our skill of noticing sensations, because this is the gateway to presence. When I hear sometimes people say, well, when I do inquiry with you, then, it works. When I do it on my own, it doesn't. Then I would say, there's still not enough ability to notice sensations, right? We want to strengthen that. We want to nurture that. We are also going to be talking about presence and being functional in the world, which really brings us to inquiry and the role of the nervous system in inquiry. When I was talking about resilience, that's what it is, capacity and resilience, right? So, when past arises, it affects our capacity. Most likely there's no resilience, so there is no, there may be recognition of presence, but there's no functioning from presence in a moment. Then I'm also going to speak about trauma, which, and its role and its function on a spiritual path. Because it's, so many of us have been affected by trauma in the past. And that, of course, impairs our nervous system. These are all very particular challenges that we experience because of that. But also, trauma has a great potential, a deepening potential, and a potential for transformation. Because trauma, the nervous system that is traumatized or a wounded psyche is going to look more deeply for solutions. And it's going to really be more interested in finding, a relief and a way to heal and to be in presence. I'm also going to speak a little bit about relationships, and especially, again, nervous system, role of the nervous system, capacity to be here, but also projection, how our past determines how we relate. And how does that relate again to our capacity to be here in a moment? Relating is going to be the reflection of our capacity or the lack of our capacity to be here. And also, I want to give you some practical pointers on how to strengthen the elements that are necessary for awakening. Because, of course, awakening and freedom is our goal, is the purpose of this life, is what we really want. That is the reason why we are here together. So pointers to how to strengthen these elements: desire for truth, discrimination, trust. So I'm very much looking forward to our time together. I'm very excited about this focus and these topics, and I hope to see you there.